Okay, everyone, this is our second presentation, and it's called Involving the Viewer. And so what do we mean by involving the viewer? Well, really, it's about trying to draw in the person who is looking at your artwork and kind of get them drawn into what you're doing, the piece of artwork that you've created. And we have several different ways that we can get that viewer to make a connection and want to explore our pieces a lot more. And so let's go ahead and just take a look at those different ways we can do that. And we'll kind of go through each one point by point. So the first one is tactile and visual appeal. The second way we can involve the viewer is through engaging curiosity, then representation, abstraction and stylization, scale, content, personal interaction, and the unexpected. So why don't we go ahead and begin to talk about tactile and visual appeal and what that means. Well, tactile and visual appeal means artwork that relates to the sense of touch. Okay, so anything we might be really connected to, how we may hold something, how something may feel, those are the kind of ways that we want to think about it. And so if we take a look at Sheila Hicks's work, where she mainly is a fiber artist, these are sort of made with almost like carpeting material. You get a sense that it's going to be soft and squishy. Okay, these are really sort of these non-representational pieces. All right, if we take a look at this guy, okay, this fuzzy dog, just envision what that is going to feel like. That's going to be super soft, right? You can almost feel what that material feels like, even without ever having touched it. You have a really good idea of how it's going to feel. When we take a look at Steve Lee's cup, we can get a sense for how our finger may hold this cup and how it's connected to the hand. Okay, that soft curve of this cup. Or even this piece. Now, if you take a look at this piece, it's actually made out of a series or repetition of a lot of pencils, okay, cut in different ways. But if we think about this relating to tactile, you're not really going to want to touch this piece, right? It's probably going to hurt you, almost like if you saw broken glass on the ground, you're not going to want to touch it. And so this has that same way of relating to the hands. Another way we can begin to involve the viewer is through engaging curiosity. And what is engaging curiosity? Artwork that creates visual puzzles that we don't immediately understand. Artwork that asks questions, what is that? And personally, engaging curiosity for me is probably the most interesting way of drawing in your viewer into really wanting to explore your piece. But that's my personal touch, okay? So let's take a look at these pieces, okay? Anthony Gormley's pieces is a great example of engaging curiosity, creating those visual puzzles that we don't immediately understand. And we also want to ask ourselves what is happening. So if we take a look at this, they look like people, right? But yet there's some narrative there that we don't really know what's happening. And so we're going to want to explore this artwork much further until we come to some idea what it is. But usually a really great way of engaging curiosity doesn't ever answer the question that the viewer is looking for. Okay, it probably poses more questions. So if we take a look at this, we're probably going to ask ourselves the same thing. Like, why is this a human figure? Why is there Donald Duck, or is it Daffy Duck? I'm not really sure, on the side of the chest. Why is there like a merry-go-round on the top? Is this a piece of clothing? Is this some kind of figure from the future? We're never really going to be able to answer that. Here's Patty Warashina's piece, and this is another excellent example of engaging curiosity. So let's start to break it down by the elements. So if we take a look, what are those questions we're going to be wanting to ask that we don't have answer? One is let's take a look at how these figures relate to one another. If we look at them, they sort of know each other, but we don't know how they know each other. When we take a look at them individually, we notice that there's a weird pattern on them, okay, which draws us in even further. And you can notice that by the hair here, okay, this here, there's these lines, okay. All this sort of stuff draws us in. How are these figures connected? We also notice there's this egg, right? And if we look at the bottom of this egg, it's kind of blood red in some ways. So what does this mean? Obviously, the figures know exactly what they're doing, but we as the viewers do not. We don't know what the correlation is between the egg or the figures or why they're dressed as such. This is another one of Patty Warashina's pieces, okay? There's some more engaging, there's those visual questions we can't answer. So why is there a small head with this little thing coming out of the side? The same thing can be said here. What is this? These two things seem related, but we don't know what they are. If we take a look at the figure is two colors, right? It's yellow and it's white right down the middle. We also notice that there's a pattern on the pedestal she's sitting on. It also carries through into her legs and her hands, and we don't know why that is. It's the same pattern that we see repeated up here, and even a little bit of this head, it's kind of connected to it. But again, we don't know the answer to this question. We don't know how these two figures relate to one another, and so it's going to draw us in even further. Jason Walker's, love this, by the way. This is a ceramic piece. And let's again start to break down the visual puzzles we don't immediately understand. We notice there's a swimmer in there, right? If you really take a look, here's your swimmer character. He's got floaties on. Probably it's a great question to ask. Why does this person need floaties? And it seems like they're in water, but not necessarily. We take a look at this, it almost seems like a fish shape, right? With the fins, but we see this figure, all right? And then what are these light bulbs connected to these lines going in and out of the water? And then it's almost like a tail on coming out the other end. And so you're going to ultimately explore this piece again and again and again, looking for those answers that you're not going to be able to draw upon. But yet it still seems like this figure knows exactly what he's doing, or she for that matter, because I'm not sure if that's his hair or her hair or something that you put to cover if you're swimming. So again, we don't really know all the answers to this question here. Why is this figure's head turned away compared to all these others in line? Again, another interesting narrative, David Reek's piece, okay? If you go down to Millennium Park, you know, the first thing you'll encounter is this water fountain with these spitting faces. The neat thing, if you go down there, especially during the summer, I think they changed the faces are different people. There's two of these long rectangles facing one another. And every 12 minutes, the face puckers up and it shoots water out of the mouth. And again, when we look at this, we don't really understand what's going on. Why are there people's faces on these big rectangles? Why is there water coming down? These are things we're not going to be able to answer. The bean sort of draws you in, right? You're not really sure what it is. There's a little bit of engaging curiosity going on there. Even June Kaneko's pieces, okay? We don't know what they are. These are dangos. We're going to want to explore those a little further. And we're using non-representational in these to sort of draw us in. We see the repetition of these patterns. We see that there's several of them. But we don't really know why they're there. Okay, so let's talk about representation. Okay, what is representation? Artwork that resembles something we know or artwork that resembles something that we're familiar with. So let's take a look at this piece. So I'm going to ask you, what do you think this piece is made out of? Do you think it's made out of leather and kind of beaten up? You know, it's a hard one to think, but believe it or not, this is a piece that was made by an artist and it's actually ceramics. And so there's a real play with what the material looks like. So we want to think about representation as really good familiarity to the things that we make. So again, think about this. This is actually ceramics. Take a look at this piece. What do you think this piece is? This is actually done by one of our students here. His name is VJ Paniker, and he's a student at Oakton Community College, and that is ceramics as well. I think it's really interesting. The day that I took the picture for this, there was a guy there. His name was Ken, and he couldn't believe, picked it up. He just could not believe that this was made out of ceramics, even inspecting it at a very close proximity. All right, so I have a little story about this guy. What do you think? Do you think this is a real person? If you think it's a real person, it's not, believe it or not. It's, I think, Dwayne Hanson's piece. And this is a picture that I took in Milwaukee. And I actually have a kind of a funny little story about this. I wasn't sure where to go for a conference of clay. And so I went up to this security guard and found myself talking to him, and he was just standing there. I wanted to know where this clay conference was at, and he never moved. And I looked off to the side, and there was actually an information area, and I was just thinking to myself, oh, maybe I should go over there, but I'm not sure what the deal is with this guy. But I looked down, and lo and behold, it was one of Dwayne Hanson's piece. So he does some really interesting pieces, and I'll show you some more of his pieces further. And they're made out of fiberglass, and sometimes they're usually clothes that he finds. But anyway, these are tourists. So he likes replicating people, and then putting them in some interesting places. So like, here's a guy that's working. The guy to the left is a real person. The guy to the right, who looks like he's working in some gallery, again, is another one of his pieces. And it just sort of fools you. It really does something to you and sort of draws you in to believing that you know what this is, but you're really looking at a piece of artwork. A painter, okay, so imagine going into the room of a gallery and coming across this guy that's kind of painting the gallery. You may be thinking you shouldn't be there, but it's actually artwork. Funny story, I once went to the Art Institute of Chicago, and there was like a sleeping security guard in the middle of the room, and I thought them sitting in a chair, just slumped over with his little, he had some food with him. And I was thinking, man, how can this guy get away with just sleeping here? He should be looking at the artwork. And lo and behold, I looked at it. It was just one more piece of artwork. A tourist, okay, he loves the tourist things. If you notice, a little bit of sunburnt, sleeping in a gallery. Can you imagine coming across this person? I think that would be kind of fun, right? A janitor, okay, so again, you put him in a gallery, put her in a gallery, and you put this artwork where people can see it, and they're just going to throw you off for a loop. This is Richard Shaw's piece. I can probably have you guys guess this material. I saw this in person. It stands about 6.5 feet tall, so it's quite large. And it is also ceramics. Richard Shaw has a whole history. He's been doing ceramics for a very long time, where he's really into these replicating things that we're familiar, and really makes you, as the viewer, to really second guess what it is that you're seeing. This is actually one of my pieces. And I like to emulate metal and wood, and so I have a little bit of sense of play within this particular field as well, okay, or this concept as well. Okay, so let's talk about abstraction and stylization. They're similar, but they're different. So let's talk first about stylization. Okay, what is stylization? Stylization is artwork in which the artist uses artistic liberties to create something unique instead of trying to create something accurately. Okay, so let's think about that for a second. Artwork in which the artist uses artistic liberties to create something unique instead of trying to create it accurately. So if we take a look at this piece, this is from Nigeria and it's painted wood. But if we look at it, it's highly stylized. So why do we say that? Well, we know that this is the human figure, right, that we're replicating, but people's mouths are not square, okay? We don't have two holes. This could be teeth in the middle, but you know, that's not the shape of our mouth. These sort of giant eyes in this shape is not the shape of our eyes, okay? And our head is not sort of a half a oval, right? And nobody has these little dots down below here. So this is what we would really consider stylization. Again, that artist is taking liberties of creating something that's very unique with not interested in replicating it to be exact. So let's think again about like Dwayne Hanson's pieces and how that figurative is very, very different from the figurative stuff that we're seeing right now. All right, and the same thing, we could look at this. Okay, our eyes are not narrowed in. What is this? This isn't on most people's faces. Okay, again, it's stylized, but it's, you know, it's that artist really playing with those liberties, right? So getting an interesting way of creating it. This is Big Boy with me, right? And so that's a highly stylized figures. If you ever go up to Michigan, it's a restaurant. It's called Big Boy. You can kind of get this like this Big Mac kind of burger. But anyway, that's a story for another day. But if we take a look at the stylization of this, we notice that the head is very, very large. Our eyes are not this size, right? Our hair, nobody's got hair like that. I mean, man, I wish I had hair like that. I just don't have it. But if you notice, the head is really big. The head is about the size of the body. And so again, the artist is taking those artistic liberties to really play with what the human figure looks like. All right, even these, you know, big, enormous heads. You know, these are the Easter Island heads. I think they're called moai. Really incredible pieces. Again, our heads aren't square, our scale isn't, proportions a little different. And so we can take a look at that. Okay, these are done a really long time ago. People's heads are not sort of these rectangular shapes, okay? So if people really did look like this, okay, and if we had it, we converted that, people look like that, right? So two totally different things. These are really highly stylized. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about abstraction. Now, I have a long sort of definition for what abstraction is, but it's really a good one. If you really want to get to understand what abstraction is, this is your definition, okay? An abstract shape is one which suggests to your mind what it is meant to represent. It does not describe the object, but it presents to you visual information which invokes in you the idea of the object or subject. Okay, so let me read that one more time, okay? An abstract shape is one which suggests into your mind what it is meant to represent, okay? But it doesn't describe the object, but it presents to you a visual information which evokes in you the idea of an object or subject. And I've got a great comparison for what we want, how we might want to think about abstraction. So let's take a look at this. Everybody's probably familiar with a snowman, right? To me, it's a great example of abstraction. So when we take a look at this, we have three circles, significant, getting a little smaller each time, stacked up on one another, but they're getting smaller as they go forward. But what do we notice about this? Well, we tend to think about the snowman as being figurative, right? It evokes this feeling of something being figurative. But these three stacked balls on top of one another absolutely have nothing to do with the human figure, right? But it evokes in your mind the idea that it's figurative. So for me, that's a really great way we want to think about that. Okay, it doesn't look at like the object at all, but yet it reminds us of that. Okay, so Henry Moore's piece, that's a good abstraction. This has nothing to do with the human figure, but it reminds us of it, right? We see maybe a breast there, maybe some hands and some legs, but if we really start to break it down, this has absolutely, again, nothing to do with the human figure. All right. Oh, yeah, and there's a picture of me. I always take really bad pictures, so just prepare yourself. But I like to get in there to give you a sense of scale. Here's another Henry Moore's piece. Just a really good, another example of abstraction, okay? Here's another really good one. I think I took this in Rome. But again, it really reminds us of something that's figurative, right? I mean, you kind of see a leg. We kind of see a head. These were, but it, again, that if we really want to think about this, this has nothing to do with the human figure. And abstraction doesn't always need to reflect a human figure. It could be a lot of different other things, okay, when we're dealing with art. I just happened to focus in on the human figure. All right. Well, not everything, right? Here's a horse. And so again, this is Deborah Butterfield's piece. Okay, I think it's bronze. It has a reference of wood. And again, this has nothing to do with a horse if we really think about it. Okay, I think I took this in New Orleans. Another good example. Okay. If you ever go to downtown Chicago, Pablo Picasso's piece is really a great example of that as well. If you take a look at it, it looks like maybe a baboon. And some people say it's two people kissing here. Do you see it? Okay, it's kind of abstract, but yet it has a reference of some kind of animal. There's some people in there, but honestly, it's really neither. Okay, here's another side profile of it. Okay, really love that. And here's kind of that face again. Do you see it? Here's the head, here's the lips. All right, but then we've got this sort of baboon figure, right? So if you look at it, you'll see a lot of different stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the next area, which is scale. So we can play with scale. We can make scale big or we can make scale small, really get a sense of it. Okay, so artwork that manipulates size, bigger or smaller, to change our perceptions about an object. Okay, again, let me repeat that. Scale. Artwork that emphasizes size, bigger or smaller, to change our perception about that object. Klaus Oldenburg, I'm not sure if he's still alive. For some reason, I think he passed away, but I could be completely wrong. He always said size matters. He would take small, mundane objects that you find around your house, sort of blow them up to giant proportions. And so if we take a look at this piece, this is in Philadelphia. It's just a big clothespin. So again, that really insignificant piece and making it really into an artwork that stands out, and you draw a lot of attention to that. Take a look at this. This is in sort of Kansas City, and it's like from badminton. Okay. Again, we can see the scale of a little girl in the picture. Here's a giant figure. Again, if we take that figure, we blow it up. If you guys remember the PowerPoint a while back with Michelangelo's David, I mean, you seeing that thing in person, it just really leaves you in awe. The scale of that just draws you into that piece. This is the Colossal of Constantine. Now here, it may not seem very big as a big piece. This is one of the oldest. This is in Rome, this piece. And I mean, take a look at that perspective. Unfortunately, there's only a few pieces left of this, but I mean, get a sense for what the size of that figure probably looked like. Just absolutely massive. Okay, this painting, okay, even though we're talking about a two-dimensional thing, I mean, look at the scale of this, size of this piece. Again, you're really going to be drawn in as a viewer to want to explore it and check it out. This is the troll underneath the bridge in Seattle. So if you ever get a chance to go out to Seattle, go check it out. It's kind of a fun sculpture. And it literally is a sculpture under a bridge, okay? We can think about scale in terms of going into places. You know, those big cathedrals in Europe, you go in there, you feel really small once you get inside. This is the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. And once you get inside there, imagine feeling like you become very, very small. Okay, you have this enormously grand space in which you're exploring, and you as the viewer are kind of shrinking down into size. Take a look at that sort of beautiful dome, okay, as you begin to walk along and check that out. This is the Vatican, okay, St. Peter's Basilica. It's huge. I mean, pictures do not do it justice as to how big this sense of space is. So think for centuries, people walking into the space and feeling very, very small. Okay, it's football fields in sense of size. Okay, let's talk about content. What is content? Content is an idea conveyed through the artwork that implies the subject matter, story, or information the artist is communicating to the viewer. What is the artist trying to say? Okay, this is another great way to involve the viewer. Okay, let's talk about this again. Content. An idea conveyed through the artwork that implies the subject matter, story, or information the artist is communicating to the viewer, what the artist is trying to say. So let's take a look at Edward Kienholz's piece, The State Hospital. I want you just to think for a minute, what do you think the artist might be trying to say? Why make a piece of artwork that's so gloomy like this? So the main reason that he made it is, now this piece goes back to 1964, and he's trying to make a statement about what the state hospitals were like in the 60s. They were almost like prisons, really. People were nameless. So let's take a look at how the elements of this piece that we begin to break down. Do you notice the gloomy color, the position, the thinness of the figure, the voidless face, okay? We notice that the hand is being strapped down into this bed. Okay, there's this really nasty bedpan down below. Everything seems filthy, even if you look at this. And if we notice, there's this neon bubble, right? But it's right above him. So is this really a bunk bed? Or is this figure thinking about himself locked in this bed? So it's really interesting when you start to break it down. You also notice that the figure is nude. So Edward Kienholz is really trying to make the content being that state hospitals reform really needs to be put into place. They're horrible places. Certainly people with mental illness deserve much better than this. People that move into these spaces are, again, faceless and nameless, and there's just a lot of gloom. And so that's an excellent example of that. We take a look at this piece. This is a play on George W. Bush and Cheney, the vice president, talking about the oil and sort of going to war. It's a political content piece, okay? You have some oil on the top here, and, it's making a statement about what was happening during the, early 2000s with the Gulf War, okay? Statue of Liberty. Now, in this way, a lot of people bring content to this particular piece, right? Gives you a sense of freedom and being in America. a sense of liberty. Okay, even its title is the Statue of Liberty. So think of all the countless people that passed by when they were going to Ellis Island and took a look at this really beautiful sculpture in New York. All right, personal interaction. So let's just go ahead and move on to the next topic. What's personal interaction? Artwork that we are physically involved with, such as jewelry, architecture, and installation art. We've talked a little bit about installation art, okay, in the previous PowerPoints, but again, artwork that we are physically involved with, such as jewelry, architecture, and installation art. Jane Seymour's, that's a good example. You put on a necklace, and you're wearing a piece of art. So jewelry really does fulfill a lot of that. Again, you have that personal interaction with the piece. If we go into a beautiful space, I mean, imagine this is a work of art, okay? It's not just a building. It's gold glitten, it's very decorative. The use of repetition is throughout. Again, when you go into a space like this is a work of art. Installation art such as this. This is Richard Serra's work. I believe this is in Seattle. You're going to walk around these non-representational sculptures and explore them. You're going to personally interact with these pieces, right? As you walk from sculpture to sculpture and really get a sense for it. Don't normally want to think about furniture in that category, but it is, especially pieces that are very really thinking about becoming art, okay? Sometimes we always think about art as being something that's on a pedestal or a certain type of material, but even household objects, things that we use that are functional, we can view them as really these sort of beauties, works of art. And so these, you're going to sit down on them, you're going to get engaged in them, you're going to sort of enjoy them. How about that for a chair? I took up in Milwaukee. I mean, that's a really neat chair. I'd be scared to sit in it. I mean, it seems so precious. But again, you can personally interact with this piece. And this is just a really great example of using those artistic liberties to create something that we already know or already familiar with, and recreating it into something that's really neat. And remember, these terms, all of these terms that we're using, they can be when you're making artwork, they can be a combination of stuff. They don't need to either be tactile and engaging curiosity. They can be both. They can be two things. They can be three things. Okay, so think of it that way. Here's personal interaction. One of Linda Arbuckle's cups. You're going to want to hold this. You're going to interact with it, but it's beautifully crafted. It's handmade. It's a really nice piece. And then lastly, we're going to talk about the unexpected. What's the unexpected? This is a stretch even further from engaging curiosity, but the unexpected is artwork that is put together in a strange and unusual way. Okay, doesn't even make sense. We're engaging curiosity. You kind of get a sense for it. You don't know what it is. It's a mystery. The unexpected is like you're out there. Okay, it is not anything that you're connected to. So let's take a look at this. This is Joe Moreau's piece. None of this makes sense, right? We have a pigeon, a parrot sitting on a stick. There's like a severed leg in the middle of this piece of wood. There's like a cat toy coming down and a map and a hat and what appears to be a fish. None of this makes sense in combinations. So you put all these really random pieces together. Again, nothing that makes sense is the easiest way to think about this. And you can call it a piece of art, okay? You don't expect these two things put together, right? I mean, nobody puts fur on a cup. Can you imagine drinking a cup of coffee out of this and stirring it with that spoon? Kind of disgusting, right? But so we do not expect these two things to come together, fur and functional pottery, right? We do not expect, this is Salvador Dali's, expect to see a lobster on top of a phone. And again, this is not something that this would catch us off guard with. So it's a great way of drawing in the viewer to be like, whoa, what's happening here, right? Okay, here's another example. We don't expect this sort of figurative thing to be connected as big dial, like big, you know, circle shape on top. Again, we do not expect this. I think this guy's name is Nick Cage. Does some really interesting stuff. He's kind of a real trendy artist these days. So he's worth looking up. If I mispronounced his name, I apologize, but I believe that's his name. Okay, and so that's involving the viewer. Okay, so just think about those terms. It's really a great way to drive people, get people to really want to take a look at your work, get them looking at it again and again and again. Unlike maybe like a Santa Claus, you see, like in the wintertime, you see a Santa Claus on somebody's lawn. You take a look at that. Oh, I get it. It's Santa Claus. It's, you get it. It's the whole Christmas thing. But these pieces really get you to look at it again and again and again. And that's really the mark of a good piece of artwork. Well, thanks again for joining me. And I hope you enjoyed my presentation of how to involve the viewer. All right. Have a great day.